Hey, this is Joe Gilder from HomeStudioCorner.com. I want to show you a little drum mixing trick that might come in handy for you at some point in the future. See, there's this thing about drums, and specifically snare drum. Depending on how it's recorded, you may really want a nice thick snare, which I tend to like thick snares, and it may just not be in the cards for you in just the way the snare was recorded. Could be the snare itself, could be any number of things, the way the mic was placed, but sometimes you just have to chalk it up to, I'm not going to have a thick snare in this song, but sometimes you can rescue it. So here, let me just quickly play with, this is a mix I'm working on. It's not finished, but I've got the drums kind of set up for, at least initially, and this is the sound I've got so far. Okay, so the snare's got some ring to it, which I tend to like. I've done some EQ to get rid of some of the excessive ringing. But let me show you, this snare originally came with just a single snare track, okay? So this snare 2 that you're seeing here is just a duplicated version of the first one. So let me mute that. I'll start playback again. I'll mute this extra snare and listen to how much thinner the snare sounds once I mute it. And then I'll show you how I did it. Now that sound by itself, there's nothing wrong with it. It's a nice, bright, snappy snare. Maybe that's the kind of snare sound you want. You can stop the video and move on. But if you do want to know how to get a thick snare sound, if you'd like to have one at some point, this is what I did. So again, here's that snare sound without the thickening agent. And then with thickness added in, we'll even name this thick. There you go. Now you know which one's which. That's your thick snare. So what did I do? Well, first, let me solo the snare here on my mixer, and you can hear just the snare by itself. Okay, so what I did is really similar to what I did in a previous video, I don't know, 5 or 6 videos back, where I showed a trick for thickening up a keyboard part, and I duplicated the keyboard part and took it down an octave and used some EQ to add some lower octave stuff to the existing keyboard part. In that instance, there wasn't a bass part in the song, so doing that allowed me to have a thicker low end that wasn't there previously. So what I did, I took the original snare, which is this, I duplicated it entirely, and then I took it down. Instead of taking it down an octave, I took it down 9 semitones. So I just played around with how many half steps I want to take it down to make it sound really thick. Going down a full octave didn't sound right, but going down whatever 9 semitones is, that did sound kind of good. So here's that by itself. So it goes from this to this. Now that doesn't sound very good by itself, but when you blend it back in, it starts to give you some thickness. Okay, but there's still just a lot of resonance of cymbals and things like that that are being picked up by the microphone. So I use an EQ to roll off any of that top end, so it ends up just being just a thick sounding part. Okay, you blend that in with the snare and you end up with a pretty thick sound. It's not super clean and it's a little dirty sounding, but it kind of works for this song, which is fairly heavy, so you end up with this right here. Which to me just works better for this particular song. You may not like the snare sound entirely, and that's okay. You don't have to like the snare sound, but to just know that this is one way to get a thicker snare sound, because I tried boosting the low end, and actually, if you could see my mixer right now, I've got everything below 100 hertz boosted quite a bit on the original snare, and it just wasn't thick enough. It just wasn't there. So I manufactured some low end by taking it down almost an octave, and then blending the two together. And now I've got a thicker snare that kind of works with everything else in the song. So there you go. Try that on a drum mix. You may discover that you just love it. And let me know how it goes. All right. Thanks for watching. See you in next week's video.